Oh, guess what? Garland Nixon and Jamarl Thomas here to hang out and start off the weekend. And we're going to talk about the mother of all debacles and the father, the entire family of all debacles, Kursk. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas. And don't forget, Jamarl Thomas has his own channel, and we run these shows whenever we're together. We run them on both channels. So if you are watching it on my channel, make sure that you are become a member, that you're a subscriber to Jamarl's channel. And if you're on Jamarl's channel, just make sure you come over and you're a subscriber. We're gonna grow our audiences here. And while we're there, we're gonna have a lot of fun, and we're gonna be doing more and more shows together, because mainly it's not about you, it's about us. We actually have fun doing it. So at any rate, let's get rolling. When I started, I was watching Alexander Mercouris. Everybody, I watched the Durant. He's a fun guy to watch, and he's talking about his favorite word, debacle, right? And he's talking about the debacle in Kursk.
You had to say with a British accent, though.
Oh, that's what I love about him. I listen to him. It's fantastic. And I'll tell you what popped into my mind. I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to throw it at you. Early in the war, Lindsey Graham, fight to the last Ukrainian. Now I look on, these videos that you see on Telegram, and they're scrambling around like mice, running for their lives, drones coming down, artillery blow. They all run towards this bridge, and it was a setup, because the Russians attacked them, and they all went for the river, and there were bridges, right? Well, just before they get to the river, do I have to tell you what happens? The Russians blow the bridge. And now they get to the river, and they're trapped like mice. And of course, artillery runs in, and I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? Your thoughts on that concept? You know what I mean? It's in the beginning, this wanton, reckless disregard for the lives of Ukrainians by the likes of Lindsey Graham. And now you see the outcome of that.
Yeah.
Jamarl.
Well, I mean, it depends on where you want to start, right? This war has been bizarre. This is not normal. And the reason why I say that is, on some level, this is the first modern war in the digital age, where we can see it, where everybody can just perch watching it, right? But the other part of this, and Kursk is a really good example of this, is it's a propaganda war. And what I mean by that is Zelensky requires all of this equipment, all of this money, all of these resources from foreign sources. So it's not like you're building this stuff at home and you're doing a war. I'm getting it from America, I'm getting it from Germany, I'm getting it from France, I'm getting it from England. You're getting it from all of these places, which means you are fundamentally reliant on how those populations view that war and how those leaders view the war. And so from his point of view, Zelensky is not just fighting a war on the ground, he's also fighting this war to panhandle. I need to keep getting money. And what that means, though, is when I'm having an offensive, I'm going to tease the offensive. I'm going to say an offensive is coming. I'm going to run promo ads about an offensive that's coming. And it's who does that? The Russians weren't doing that. The Russians weren't doing videos about how they were going to do an offensive and where the offensive was coming and all this other nonsense. And so Russia built up that offensive. And when they finally did, after 5 months, they were crushed. They were completely crushed. But you had to keep the propaganda going. And so Kursk ended up being one of these propaganda exercises. When it first happened, I remember going on there and I said, all right, this is humiliating for the Russians. Fair enough. I said, but all of those people are going to die. All of those people are going to be pushed out. And CNN was like, nope, you're wrong, Jamarl. This is great. This is fantastic. This is military brilliance. And I was like, how is this brilliant? They lost every battle that they fought. And now you've invaded Russia. And Putin said flat out, we're not negotiating on territory. We're not, which means everybody is going to die. We're going to do everything in our power to push these people out. Russia didn't even pull people from the front lines, so they kept going after Ukraine invaded. B, they pulled people from all of these other places in order to fill the gaps, meaning they were pulling reservists, they were pulling anybody that they could to stop the Ukrainians, after which they were stopped after a few weeks, pushed them back. Ukraine wanted to get to the power plant. Within a few days, that was over with. They were bogged down. And at the point where they were bogged down, they just started getting pushed, just slow walked back. It was so bad, and they were losing so many people. Keep in mind, they used their best people for this. So while Russia was pushing on the front lines, 1,000-kilometer front, they decided to take their best people off that front in order to do this. Zelensky was asked about this, and Zelensky says, okay, you invade, now what? And Zelensky didn't have an answer. And he gets pissed off at Zelensky. He goes to another person. They ask him, now what's point two? You invade, okay, fair enough. They're not defending it because there's nothing there. So now what? He had no answer. And yet, Zelensky did it anyway. He didn't get to the power station. And then they got bogged down, and it became, okay, we'll just hold. Maybe we can have negotiations when negotiations take place. Trump's pushing for negotiations. We'll trade land. And Russia was like, that is not going to happen. There's that. All of you are going to die. And then what they realized was, okay, this is a bad idea, but we can't leave, because if we leave, the Russians are going to follow us. So it's like, so you took your best people on a propaganda exercise. You got those people killed. And then it got so bad that they couldn't even leave because they were terrified that if they left, the Russians would just chase them into another front. That was Kursk. And now that pocket is closing. The Russians did a Suza pipeline raid, which is, I could not believe that they were willing. They used special forces that invade the pipeline, go through the pipeline, pop out behind the Ukrainian lines, creating all sorts of chaos. And all of these areas that the Ukrainian military had just started to collapse. And to your point, when they finally said, okay, we need to get the hell out of here, Russia blew up the bridge, which means they were trapped and they got annihilated. Right now, there's a small, I guess you can call it a pocket that's left of people who are, for the most part, surrounded. And those people are going to die. This is Kursk. This is what all of those generals said were fantastic. This is what all those people on CNN said were great. It was so bad. And I'll close it on this. That some people thought Putin did it on purpose. Think about that. Like, something is so bad that they think this was Putin's brilliance to allow Ukraine to invade. I don't believe that, because for me to believe that, I would have to believe that Putin allowed like 1,000, if not more, people to die. By the same token, it does get across how bad it was for the people who invaded. And this was Zelensky's harebrained idea. They used his best people for this, took them off the front lines in order to do this. And if you notice, after they did Kursk, their front lines started to erode faster and faster and faster because they took those people from the front lines in order to do that nonsense. They didn't build up defenses. They didn't, solidify that area. They decided, we're going to invade Kursk. Okay, you've invaded. Now all of your people are dying, and the rest are going to get pushed out.
I remember. And you know what? Here's the other part of it. It was a PR op because I heard various reasons, right? Okay, we heard about the nuclear power plant. We heard that there was a place where tactical nuclear weapons were stored, and they were going to go take that area and hold on to that and force the Russians to negotiate. Then we've taken part of a Kursk. We'll negotiate. We'll give you some of your land back for some. Every other week they had a different reason or a different use for the Kursk and all this kind of stuff. Kursk. And I've heard over the course of time that I think it was the Brits or something, the MI6, so the British generals or something, that was saying they did the planning, that apparently the planning didn't, like everything else. Ukraine never planned anything, right? So they're sitting out there. And, and listening to Ritter and these guys, one of the things they bring up is this. If you got a bunch of troops and they move up, right? You got to be careful how far and how fast you move, because you always got to have supplies coming in, ammunition, food, fresh soldiers, and all that, right? When they moved into Russia, it was inevitable that Russia was going to cut their supply lines at some point. You're in Russia. At some point, they're going to cut your supply lines, but you're still going to be in Russia, and you ain't going to be able to leave. And at that point, The outcome is inevitable. And you're watching this. And meanwhile, it seems like what the Russians did for a while is while they were in there, they just pounded them. They strafed them with machine guns. They threw. So you're dug in Russia, and you're getting strafed and you're getting artillery. And so you're just sitting there hoping for what? I don't know. And then you get hit. And then at some point you wake up and you realize, holy crap, they're cutting our last few supply lines. We got to get out of here. And they planned for that. They got the road sitting there for you to head out. It's all muddy at just the wrong time. You get a feeling that this was part of the Russian plan, like they were waiting for this, like maybe they could have did this or whatever, but it's the worst time of year. There's a name for this time of year, but everything freezes. Yes. And then after, right when it starts to thaw, the fields and everything, because when it's frozen, you can go take track vehicles and everything across hill and dale, across, farmland and everything. But then naturally, and I've even seen it here, if there's a frozen winter and it freezes, as soon as things thaw, you got a lot of mud, and there it's lots of farmland. So the only thing you got is these skinny roads. That's the only way in and the only way out. And the Russians just got them loaded with artillery, drones, you name it. So it's like the Russians set this all up to say, once the things get muddy and you only got a few little skinny ways out, that's when we'll move on you. And then everything was prepped, bridges to be blown, you name it. And they just trapped them. And it is bad news. And you look at it and you're like, and the British, with that kind of strategy, they're really talking about fighting Russia. But I tend to think of this, though. That's why I said to the last Ukrainian, you know what? If I'm fighting this guy, I'm very wary with me or my people, because I got to go home and explain to my citizens, hey, we've lost a lot of your sons. So I don't want to have to go home and say we threw your sons into a fire trap, a fire bag, whatever they call it, and they all got annihilated. And it comes out that I was reckless with their lives. But what the hell? It's Ukrainians. How many times have we heard American politicians say stuff like this? This is the greatest investment ever. We poured in all this money. We killed Russians. We didn't lose a single guy. We haven't lost one person. And you're like, but you lost 1 million Ukrainians. Who gives a shit about that? Anyway, we haven't lost a single guy. Yes, this is manna from heaven. This is wonderful. And if I'm the Ukrainians, I'm like, there's something about this conversation that I find a bit unsettling.
Yep.
My life, it's like, you know what it is? We will sacrifice as many Ukrainians. So what do we care if you're a person who just wants to kill Russians? What do you care if it's 100 to 1? We don't care if we lose 100 Russians, Ukrainians to every one. They're dispensable. That's what they're there for. That's what we fattened up the goose because the holiday was coming. And now the holiday's here. We're going to slaughter the goose and we're going to have a feast. You didn't fatten up that goose. You didn't give them money, uniforms, tanks, and all that kind of stuff because you liked them or because they were your friends or you were supporting and standing with Ukraine. You did that so you could use them as cannon fodder. And this is, that's why I've said this. One of these days, man, when this thing is over, Ukrainians are going to wake up and they ain't going to be mad at the Russians. I mean, the Nazis will never like Russians, but I'm saying as a group, as a nation, they're going to wake up and they're going to look at whoever, Lindsey Graham, you name it, saying, they'll fight to the last Ukrainian. And they're going to say, what the hell just happened to us? And let me throw this at you.
So true.
This is important. I want to hear what you got to say about this one. How many times have we heard this? Yes, we want to put them in a strong position to negotiate. They're taking Kursk, so they'll be in they're doing this, so they'll be in a strong position to negotiate. Well, all these things, we've got to give them more weapons. So when they come to the negotiating table, they'll be in a strong position to go to negotiate, right? They're going to the negotiation table tomorrow. How's things looking right now as far as being in the strong? And meanwhile, I'm looking on video. They're running around like mice. Blam! Flattened, all of them gone, blown to smithereens. Could there be a weaker position? They're finally going to the negotiation. How'd that strategy go that said we're going to attack Russia and send them F-16s, M777s, Abrams tanks, Challengers? Why are you doing that? To put them in a strong position to negotiate. Well, tomorrow they go to negotiate, and I don't think they're in a very strong position.
Zelensky said that. And say, well, I can't negotiate because we need to be in a stronger position. And I was like, dude, that's not going to happen. Like you're like you have lost so many people. In fact, I think it was Mark who pointed out that they lost more material in Kursk than they did during the offensive. Like, meaning they spent so much material, like Western material, lives. They lost more in this fool's errand in Kursk than they did during that stupid offensive that they tried to pull off and failed miserably last time. It is an astonishing amount of men and material that's just wasted. And you're right, Lindsey Graham, people like that was like, hey, these are Ukrainians. What does it matter? We're getting at the Russians. This is a great investment. And you think to yourself, okay, so the lives don't matter. Like the people who are screaming the loudest about them supporting Ukraine seem to care about it less. It's that. And that is it's disgusting. I mean, when you think about it, like these people are running around claiming to care about Ukraine while simultaneously allowing it to be fundamentally destroyed and carved up. They've lost 20% of their territory. They're going to lose probably more. And now they're going to a negotiation where they're pushed into with the US government that is sick of the war. So it's, we're with you for as long as it takes. We're with you for as long as it takes. Here's $300 billion. And here's $300 billion. And now the US is like, all right, we're done with this. We want to, move on to other toys. So let's get this negotiation over with. Oh, and by the way, on our way out, we want to get 50% of everything that's in the ground. Thank you very much. Like, it is such a ripoff on some level. Like, look, Zelensky is a dirtbag, but I do get why he's pissed off. Like, if you are Zelensky, you try to go to negotiations in Istanbul, and you are moving towards a legit negotiation. And Boris Johnson comes in representing the West and says, hey, you are not going to get security guarantees from us. We need you to go out and keep fighting. We're going to give you all the weapons. We're going to give you all the money, all the bullets, all the artillery. We're going to give you everything that you need in order to fight this war. And we're going to economically destroy Russia. You're going to win this thing, buddy. So just keep going. Trust us. And then, 800,000 million dead Ukrainians later, like 1 million, 2 million broken, missing limb people later, the US is like, all right, we're done. We're calling it a day. We lost. We need to cut bait. And we need to focus now on China. So we need you to negotiate a deal. And in order to negotiate this deal, we want 50% of oil, gas, rare earth minerals, any extractable resource that's coming out of the ground. That's what we need in order to leave. What do you say as Zelensky in that? Right? Like, for one, they led you down this path of NATO, despite the fact you were supposed to be neutral. They offered NATO membership in 2008 at Bucharest Summit. On top of that, when the war starts, you get the Minsk Agreements 1 and 2, and they tell you, don't worry about it. You don't have to follow it. You don't have to pay attention to it. We're not going to push you to keep it. You don't have to do any of that stuff. And on top of that, we're going to give you all of the weapons and money. We're going to fill you up to the gills with guns and bullets and weapons and artillery so you can, push back against the Russians. And then Russia, after continuously saying, dude, you're killing Russian Ukrainians and you're on our border. This is unacceptable. You're not going to be part of NATO. After all of that, Russia goes in and you fight and lose. And now the US is trying to cut bait and leave. Now, some people would say, well, the US is abandoning Ukraine. No, the US is doing what is best at this point for Ukraine because Ukraine is lost. And the only thing that can happen to Ukraine is this military collapses or they put in kids in order to fight the war. And from my point of view, that's a worse outcome as opposed to just ending the war that they've lost. I understand that, this is a catastrophe for Ukraine, but getting them into the war was the catastrophe. Getting them out is a minor blessing considering what's going to happen if they keep fighting this war. And liberals are in this mindset that it is righteous for them to continuously fight, even if they need to throw their kids into the meat grinder. It is breathtaking to me that this even happened. It is mind-blowing to me that a country would use itself as a proxy in this way and get all of these people killed in that country at the behest of the US, Britain, France, and all of these other Russian-hating countries. It's astonishing to me. But fact of the matter is, Russia was put in a position where it's a Hobbes choice. either we respond or we allow Ukraine to be part of NATO. And Ukraine and NATO was a red line. It was always a red line. It was understood to be a red line. In fact, many of those countries going into NATO was a red line, but Ukraine was the bright red line where this is existential. That's the way Russia looked at it. And anything up to the point of nuclear weapons would have been employed in order to win that war, which means they were never going to win the war. Meaning Ukraine, there was no situation where Russia was going to allow Ukraine and the West to win that war, even if it meant ending the world. Just like it was with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the U.S. says we were willing to end the world to keep these missiles off of Cuba because it impinges upon our security. Same difference. Like, I'm sorry, the catastrophe is not the U.S. pulling out. The catastrophe is that they got into it in the first place. Pulling out is the better option at this point. It just is.
Well, you know, and here's the deal. This was in the cards the day of the Maidan. The day of the Maidan, the day they overthrew the government, the day they put in a puppet government, this was done. Those soldiers, every one of them had a bullet and had shrapnel in them the day it happened. The Russian soldier, the day you do that, we're going to dance. The Russians, I will guarantee, you and I both know this. The day they overthrew the government, the Russians sat down with their Security Council and said, prepare for war. That's what they did. Let's prepare for the sanctions. Let's prepare. And you know how bureaucratic, we've been around Russians, very bureaucratic people, very practical, right? You know, they sat down and started their war plan. You know, they said, you know, we're going to have to go in. Let's get everything. Let's get our military. Let's get these factories out of mothballs. We're going to have to make artillery, this, that, blah, blah, blah. Let's get everything prepared. Let's put more sanctions are coming, everything. Let's get with our friends, China. Let's do everything we need to do. They've been planning since 2014 because the day that the U.S. overthrew the government in 2019, the Rand Corporation's document. In that document, it was said unbalancing Russia. It said Ukraine is Russia's biggest weakness.
Yes,
they didn't read that document. They're like, okay, just a matter of when. Now, I will say this: I think there is a solution that the West has come up with, and here we go. Ukraine's top general says no risk of encirclement for Kiev's troops in Kursk. There you go. I thought they had it bad. Oh, those TikTok advertisements of people being blown to smithereens. Kiev's top general said on Monday that Ukrainian troops fighting in Russia's Kursk region were not at risk of encirclement.
He's out of his mind.
No, they're just sitting there. They're having some tea, relaxing. You know, despite a recent counteroffensive by Russian forces that has included North Korean troops. And if you're going to lie, don't make it a little one. Nonsense. In his first comment since Russia stepped up his attack, Syrskyi said on Facebook that the situation was under control, but indicated Ukrainian forces have been pulling back. The units are, I love this, taking timely measures to maneuver to advantageous positions for defense. You know, it kind of reminds me way back when I was like on boat, we'd be doing search and rescue missions. I used to do search and rescue on the bay, and you're out there and it's foggy. And back then, you know, we were on small boats. We were literally running coordinates using compasses. Mm-hmm. Was not easy stuff back then. But my point is this: somebody called you on the radio, you didn't have a clue where you were. Where are you? I'm temporarily at an undetermined location, right? I didn't know. We don't know where the hell we are. We're watching out for ships. We're trying to find this poor bastard that's lost, and we're just as lost as he is, right? Yeah. But the units are taking timely measures to maneuver to advantageous positions for defense. That sounds great. Syrskyi said he was visiting the forces on the Kursk front without specifying whether he crossed into Russian territory. There we go. He's hanging out with the forces. Probably, you know, they're playing cards, Uno mode, no doubt. Maybe chess. That's always fun. Taking shots. That's what they're doing. That's their plan. As their soldiers are getting turned into literally mincemeat. You go on, let's see, where's this? This is in Reuters. You go in Reuters and say, you know, they're maneuvering to a more advantageous position. Well, apparently that advantageous position is not on this mortal plane, shall we say. The advantageous position they got is in the next life. If they're I guess they're Nazis, so they're Valhalla or some such crap like that. Isn't this the war? Isn't this it? This is the war. They put those poor bastards on the front line. They get mowed down like cordwood, and then they just say something to Reuters. The guys they're fine. They'll be all right. They can handle it.
And add in, let's bring in 18-year-olds to that. Oh, let's bring in our kids. Let's do that now. That is such a mind-blowing thing to me, where they're trying to preserve their youth, and the U.S. is like, look, you need more manpower. We need to throw in your kids now. Like, that is mind-blowing to me. It's such a betrayal. Like, to put it mildly, you're in a military situation. You have the expectation that your government is going to do everything in its power, A, to preserve your life, and B, accomplish the objective. And that's always a dicey gray area, right? It's like, because you need to, people are going to die in a military campaign. But the thought is, okay, but the government at the very least cares. And in the context of them caring, they're going to use us to the best way that they can use us, and they're not going to waste our lives. That is off the table. That is off the table. They've wasted lives the entire campaign, especially in many of these propaganda exercise military maneuvers that these guys have been going through. They have wasted lives in the process. And even though they're lying in that article, by the way, it has gotten so bad, as you pointed out, that it is unclear whether those people can even pull themselves out of Kursk, even if they wanted to at this point. And from my understanding, Zelensky is effectively given an order to stay. Now, they may try to break out at some point, but at the point at which they try to break out, it's going to be too late. In fact, it may already be too late. It's just
what's interesting? Here's this. Here's the thing. What is the word? Post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? Afterwards, therefore, because of, right? Russia pushes Ukrainian forces back in Kursk after the U.S. halts support. Okay.
By the way, it had nothing to do with it. The U.S. support had nothing to do with it.
Post hoc ergo propter hoc. After, therefore, because of. But they don't say that, do they? They just say this happened after that happened. But if you'll notice, they don't say it happened because of it happened. You know what I mean? It's a slick way of saying, well, first A happened, then B happened. Well, did A happen because of B? Well, that's not important now. Just keep in mind that first A happened and then B happened. But you know what it is right now? Here's the sad thing. This is what it's always been. This is the information war. You know what I mean? I mean, right now, if you're in Kursk and you're huddled down in a foxhole with drones blowing up everywhere, artillery everywhere, and you're writing your last letter to your thing. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my kids I'm sorry I was an idiot for doing it. Whatever. Oh, I'm sorry I got kidnapped on the streets of Kiev by press gangs. Whatever, right? And you get a text. Bad news. We can't send any reinforcements. Good news. We're winning the information war. That's all you got. You're winning the information war. That's the last thing they'll ever see before they move on to Valhalla is the information war. And it's like you said earlier. What has this been? The Russians were like, okay, we've got a strategic plan, right? We'll take this and then we'll take that. Then we'll move on here. We'll encircle a cauldron. We'll leave them one way out because they don't even close their cauldrons anymore. They kind of mostly encircle them, but they leave a way out, right? And that way they bomb the people who are coming in to bring them to try to get in reinforcements, and they bomb the guys that are going out. It's why close it? They're stupid enough. They'll keep sending people in. We'll bomb them too. So they leave just enough of an alleyway that they can bomb people trying to come in and bomb people trying to go out, and they get 2 for 1, right? So the Russians seem to have a plan most of the time. And they do that. Where the Ukrainians, it's more like this. Man, what kind of a public relations move can we make that'll get us some more money? Yeah. Oh, let's take this territory over here, and then we can take this angle, and then we can run around to everybody and say, send us more money. Because let's face it, you're stealing it anyway. Most of it ain't going to get to the front line. You ain't buying. They send in a bunch of stuff, and you literally sell this stuff. Well, they're selling war material online that we've sent. Tucker Carlson's talked about that. They're skimming probably 7 out of every $10 off. So they're like, let's do some kind of public relations operation. The hell with the troops. They're all going to die anyway. So screw that. And we'll go ask the Danes or the Brits or the Americans, whoever, for more money. They'll send us more money. If they send us war material, we can certainly sell that on eBay, whatever the hell, Craigslist. And as you said, There's never a plan to win because they know they're never going to win.
Yeah,
It's what public relations move can we make to get them to send more stuff? And with the U.S. now, since we don't have a plan to win, Joe Biden admitted that he knew they weren't going to win. So what happens? How can we keep this thing going? By keep this thing going, we mean continually to throw Ukrainian lives into the furnace. It's unbelievable. You made a point early in the beginning. This ain't a war. I don't know what to call it. It's not even a proxy war. It's an extermination. It's the U.S. exterminating the Ukrainians to piss off Russia. I don't know. To maybe kill a few Russians. I don't. Actually, it's like they're in desperation now. They don't know what to do. Well, we can't defeat Russia, but we can't back off because then we'll look bad. Just keep throwing Ukrainians in there till we run out. It's hard. I don't know what to call this. This is history will not be kind to the legacy of the Biden, Blinken, Sullivan administration for this debacle.
No, it won't be. I mean, all of Europe and the US lost. And, you know, like I was having a conversation with Morandi, and one of the things I think I pointed out to him was, you know, the way that Trump deals with Iran is very different than the way he deals with Russia. And the difference between those things is that Russia beat him in a war. Like, meaning it was decided on the battlefield. The battlefield itself was the decision point in regards to, A, whether Ukraine was going to be part of NATO, how the West was going to affect like this kind of shape of Europe and what Europe was going to look like in the power balance of Europe. And I think what we're seeing is a bunch of colonial powers that are no longer powers. I mean, Britain has a rinky-dink military. I think you call them soccer hooligans. They have military. France,
I don't know if they could defeat the soccer hooligans. They probably
right. France, it loses every war. That is it. It's a pathetic military with a pathetic leader in Macron who is posturing, poking out his chest, offering security guarantees, and then going begging to the United States as a backstop for the security guarantees that they themselves have offered. It's like insurance on insurance. They can't do it themselves, so they got to get somebody else to do it. That's Europe. Germany is a pointless endeavor.
Yeah.
So all of these former colonial powers that used to, you know, bestrode the globe as a Galactus are fundamentally defunct. And all of them are fundamentally dependent upon the United States for any military presence that they have around the globe. And the US is like, we're done. Europe can deal with Europe. We don't have anything to do with you. We're going to negotiate with the Russians. But the only reason he's negotiating with the Russians is because Russia showed that it could beat all of them on the battlefield. It's decided on the ground. And the fact that it was decided on the ground means, okay, we have to deal with them differently. We can't do what we were doing before. Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO. We don't even know if there's going to be a NATO going forward since NATO, in its first major challenge, lost. It's meaning NATO, for the last 50, 60 years, have been chomping at the bit to go after the Soviets. Okay, the Soviet Union fell. The spirit of the Soviet Union, Russia, was still there. And they were like chomping at the bit against Russia. They were surrounding it. They were trying to encircle it. They finally get to Ukraine. Ukraine is on the border, and Russia says, "Niet, no more, stop." And they're like, "Well, no, we're going to put Ukraine in NATO." They said, "No, you're not." "Yes, we are." "No, you're not." But it comes that, and at the point where this test of strength gets decided with Ukraine as the corpse that they're effectively, you know, fighting over, they lose. And so, you know, it's like the globe, the world, has fundamentally changed with the United States effectively trying to break away from this kind of transatlantic relationship where Trump is like, you guys are taking advantage of us. For one, you guys are hiding under our skirt, right? It's like you can't do none of the stuff on your own. You need us to do it. And you want us to effectively take the lion's share of the load, the money, the military capacity, and everything else in order to do it. Okay, we're done with that. We don't want to do that anymore. We have a greater problem with China, and Russia is not really our enemy. So you guys, if you want to, you know, shake your fist at them, do it on your own. In which case they're like, but we don't want to do it on our own. We don't want to do that on our own. We don't want to do that. And he's like, hey, you can take the Russians, right? And everybody in the room laughs.
They're like,
well,
you know,
fight the Russians. What do you mean? By ourselves?
Yeah.
We can't do that. We can't
And
do
the
that.
U.S. is and now and yet you listen to von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas and all these people, right? And you're like, wait a minute. Yes, we might have to send troops into Ukraine to set these Russians, put them in their place once and for all. And you're like, I'm literally reading about these special forces from Russia that are like going on some suicide mission where they got to crawl for 12 miles through a pipe in the black dark. They come out carrying 50 pounds of machine guns and stuff. You're probably not going to make it back, but go for it. And they're like, send me fire breathing special. I mean, these guys, they're not nice guys.
So I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, these guys, they're like, we're dying, we'll fight for the fatherland. So you look at the Russians and you see a bunch of special forces, fire-breathing maniacs ready to go. They to be surrounded by Ukrainians just to breathe fire on them. Let me at them. You got to hold these guys back like werewolves. Let me at these Ukrainians, right? And you're looking at these guys. You look at the soccer hooligans from Britain. A clump of baggy, beret-wearing softies from France and some damn fat guys full of potatoes and schnitzel from Germany. And you really think the Russians are scared? You really think the Russians are scared of these guys? And they're like, let us at them. We're going to go get the Russians. And you're like, dude, you're embarrassing yourselves. Don't even do it. Please don't say it. Nobody believes that a bunch of you saw the article I had. It was an article where they said the Germans had black broomsticks. You saw that one?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Where is it? Where is it? I got to show this. For maybe somebody hasn't seen this. This is the Atlantic Council. German soldiers use broomsticks instead of guns during NATO exercises. And you're threatening these special forces guys that scare the hell out of me. I wouldn't want to fight these. They've been in combat for the last 2 years, defending the fatherland. In their minds, they don't give a shit. Kill me, whatever, I don't care. Give me a bomb. I'm going to run in right into the middle of Ukrainians and blow them to hell, right? Don't nobody in the world look at the Russian army and says, I want to fight those guys now. No, you're not scared. And Starmer. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, you don't have any soldiers to fight. You got broomsticks at best, maybe sharpened. I don't know. You can put somebody's eye out with one of those. You got no money. You're going to rebuild a $1 billion army. Might I add, the Russians, what is it? 800 and 900 billion. They want to rebuild their army.
Yep.
The Russians are like less than $100 billion a year is what they're spending on theirs. You got to spend 800 or 900 billion just to catch up with guys who are spending 100 billion. That's a bad investment. But then you got to catch up with them. It's going to take 8 years to build it. And I have a feeling they'll have a little more technology by then. You won't even have caught up to the technology they have now in 8 years. And they'll be 8 years past that. This thing is absurd. I don't even know what to say here. I'm running out of words.
Pathetic and pointless, right? I want to double down on what you were talking about with the pipeline thing. Sudza pipeline, where they stopped supplying gas to Slovakia and other parts of Europe because Ukraine was like, well, we're no longer going to supply gas. Screw Slovakia.
Right.
Pizza was pissed off. Pizza was like, this is outrageous. We were supplying you with electricity. How the hell are you cutting off our gas? Okay, fair enough. The Russians use that same pipeline, crawl through it in the dark with 300 men, I believe, on a suicide mission, knowing full well that they most likely weren't going to go home. They wrote letters saying, to my wife, to my loved ones, etc. And I was like, was this mission that important? Because when I think of a suicide mission, I hate this Star Trek reference, but I think to myself, it was about to blow up. Spock needs to give his life to save the ship.
Yep.
That's my thought of a suicide mission. Right? It's like, so the world is about to end. And I need to send people in to protect something, my country, my forces, my something. And these guys went on a suicide mission in order to accomplish this mission. That's mind-blowing. Like you said, like werewolves, trying to hold back werewolves. I'm on that. It is mind-blowing what these guys did. The those special forces that they effectively gave their lives for this mission. That is not the force you want to fight.
No.
And I think Europe knows that, considering that Europe put all of their money, troops, well, they didn't put the troops in, but they put all their money, all their weapons. Well, you did have mercenaries that were in it, all that stuff. And they got blown to hell. They got blown to hell, which is that they're maneuvering on a different plane of existence.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gone, right? And so this notion that Europe is going to fight this military is absurd. That's not what they want. They're not about that life. They can bellyache all they want. They can shake their fists all they want. To the point that you made, Europe and the US were being outproduced by Russia in regard to the equipment on that battlefield that they were effectively using. The technology of war has moved and changed just from that war alone. That war, what started off as this kind of typical modern war, eventually turned into like a drone war, a technology war, an electronic war, all of that stuff like morphed on the battlefield itself. And Germans are using broomsticks. It's like I don't know a better metaphor for what's happening right now. Europe knows that is Russia has been killing and dying for the last 3 years, mostly killing. The idea that you're taking on a battle-hardened, 1 million man military at this point, with industry and everything else in order to back them. You know what's funny? When this first started off, they were like, "Oh, the Russians are weak. They're just a gas station parading as country. Oh, they can't beat us." Obama was like, "We destroy them," and Putin knows it. All of this stuff, right? And then it becomes, well, the Russians are terrifying. The Russians are a threat. The Russians are this. The Russians are that. Because now there's a million-man military that has been beating the shit out of Ukraine for the last 3 years, and all of the Western weapons and everything else, they have effectively turned into a graveyard for Western artillery and Western weaponry. So they're not about that life. And from your point, this idea that they're going to spend 860 billion euros, where are you getting the money from? That's the first question. Your governments are well tapped out in regards to the amount of money that they effectively have to spend. They're broke. How are you getting the money to spend 860 billion euros? Like, what social services are you going to take from these people in these countries in order to even come close to doing that? The answer is they're not. They're not.
Yeah, and this is what they got. Here we go.
Putin
July
lost the
13th,
war.
2023. Biden wraps European trip, declares Putin's already lost the war in Ukraine, right?
So ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
how many times? And if you search that, you know what you can find? Article after article after article where they just says why Putin has lost. I mean, you could go on and on and on. Putin's losing now. Everybody knows, if you search, Putin losing in Ukraine, it's going to be the same thing for ever since it started 3 months in. The Russia's out of missiles. Remember that? Then they were out of chips, and they had to take chips out of washing machines. Then they were out of military. They're fighting with shovels. Now they're out of troops. They got to bring in the North Koreans. You know what I mean? The North Koreans are back. The North Koreans. What's interesting? The North Koreans were here in December, right around January 20th. For some reason, they were gone. But now they're back in the Kursk region of all places. Those darn pesky North Koreans, you never know where they're going to be on a given day. One day they're here, the next day they're back, and you're watching all of this stuff. And I remember a long time ago, Lavrov said this will be decided on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And people were like, at the beginning, remember this? Because we worked at Sputnik. Yes, the Russians are really bad at PR. And mainly they just told the truth. You know what I mean? It wasn't really PR, either one of two things. They were smart enough not to tell everybody where they were going to do it. They weren't like, yes, we've got an offensive coming and it's going to be right here. Here are the parallels. Here are the coordinates. Here are the days we're going to do it. Here's what we're going to try to accomplish in case you were planning on thwarting it, right? And meanwhile, the other side, the Ukrainians, they literally had a video. Remember that? About the offensive. Yeah, they had a promo video about the upcoming a trailer, shall we say. Now, let's say the movie didn't exactly turn out like the trailer, but they had a trailer where the Russians were going to lose. So it was put together a nice Hollywood trailer about your video, your upcoming offensive, where it's going to be, what you're going to do. And if you remember, that's when I first heard of Dragon's Teeth. The Russians put up Dragon Sea. So they told them what they were going to do. And then they're like, well, the Russians are putting up defensive. They called it the Sorovikin line, right? And I'm like, so you told the Russians where and when? And they're like, probably in the spring. And I'm like, so you literally told them we're going to do an offensive, where you're going to do the offensive, pretty much when you're going to do the offensive. You know, back in the old wars, they used to have like code words and things like that. And they would try to hide what they were going to do. And they would, you know, use code to communicate because they didn't want the enemy to know. Like literally, I saw this thing where when D-Day came, right, they made these like wooden or blow up tanks. Yeah. And they put them all over the place in one area to fool the Germans to make them think they were going to launch from over here. Then they had fake launches where they attacked further up over here, a few guys, further over there, a few guys. Then they had these wooden guys with parachutes and they flew tens of thousands over, dropped them out of the planes. So it looked like they were going to drop, you know, paratroopers in over here. They did all of these things because may sound crazy today. They wanted to fake the Germans out. They didn't do a trailer to say Normandy, June 6th or whatever day it was. That's the day we'll be attacking. And here's how many ships and people we're going to have. And here's our plans. Nobody does that. Because this wasn't a war. And needless to say, they all got killed. Everybody pretty much got obliterated on exactly as their plan went along. But the Russians were, and they just sat back there. And they said, the Russians had crumple zones or something where the enemy would attack and they could get this far and it was the fall back. And then they had minefields and stuff and artillery was ready for that. And then if you get past there, they fall back and they had people up. They never even got through the first crumple zones. They never even made it. They just like ambled into the minefields. And I think we know how it works out when some people trundle into the minefields. They ain't trundling out. And this has been this to me, the Kursk debacle, it's just like the punctuation mark. You know what I mean? It's just like a boom stamp of punctuation mark. So here's your thoughts. What the hell are they going to say tomorrow? When they sit there, what the hell are the Ukrainians can they possibly say? Talk about not having a hand. They're not even in the game.
I don't know what they're going to say. I mean, I've asked that since the first month of the war. Like at some point, somebody's going to ask, what was this for? And look, you might be perfectly right, and I hope you are right. The Ukraine is pissed off, not at Russia, but it's pissed off at its Western backers that led them down, as Mercurius would say, the primrose path in this. I mean, effectively, it led them all the way up to this point and pretending as if, hey, you're going to win. You're going to win. Trust me, you're going to win. Up to the point where they lost. And, you know, when we say loss, it's not metaphysical. We're talking about people losing their lives, people losing their lives. We're talking about a country effectively being carved up where 25% of it no longer exists under their control. And that's just what it is now. Who knows what it's going to look, Russia is not going to accept the ceasefire. Any negotiation that's going to take place is going to take place while they are still killing Ukrainians. That's what's going to happen in order to maintain pressure. They did the Minsk agreements 1 and 2. They're not going to do that again. No more Minsk in the way that they put it. So that means whatever is decided is going to be a new security architecture of Europe. That's going to be something different than came before it, with the idea that there's going to be a lasting peace that can be validated going forward. Now, Zelensky may not want that. Europe may not want that. They don't have the hard power to be decisive one way or the other, to have a choice. And that's what it boils down to, right? Trump doesn't respect whiners who are bitching and complaining, but have no military force or capacity to do anything about what's happening on the ground. So his point of view, Russia won on the battlefield. We're going to negotiate with Russia. Period. It's just that.
And is it even a negotiation? See, that's the other thing. The only people that have any cards to play, and Trump knows this, is Russia. Because Trump, it was funny because Trump's one of his Truth Social tweets or whatever it was a little different because he says, well, Russia's absolutely pounding the Ukrainians. Remember that one? He's pummeling, pounding the Ukrainians. You must stop right away or we will institute the banking and all kinds of sanctions. Then he puts, thank you. At the end, it's like, you better do it or else. So thanks, Russia, please, for not killing them all. You know, that's the first time I've seen him in. It's like, you better do or thanks. Trump knows he doesn't have any more cards than if the Ukrainians don't have cards. They've sanctioned 25,000 sanctions. What's 25,001 going to do? What banking sanctions? There ain't no banks left. Then you throw them off the SWIFT system. No. So there's. But might I add this? If I'm the Russians, I'm like, well, our economy's doing a lot better. So as far as we're concerned, keep the sanctions going. Don't get rid of these sanctions because they've been quite fruitful for us. Okay. He's got nothing to play. He's got no hand to play, nothing. And all of he's got is the burdens of this Nazi infested hellhole on Russia's border and a bunch of idiots in the EU. If I'm Trump, this is what I got to be thinking. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to lay out a fair deal, an honest deal. I'm going to say to Ukrainians, look, guys, you're screwed. I know it. You know it. Everybody knows it. The Russians, here's a document they gave me of everything they're asking for. You're not in a position to push back. If I were you, I'd sign right there by the X and give them what they're asking for. I know it's a long list, but your options are few. They asked you for your firstborn male child. They've asked you for every single thing, but it didn't have to be this way. But now you're screwed. You can sign this. Now, here's option 2. You don't sign it. We're going to go home. We ain't coming back. We're releasing the sanctions. We're trying to get some kind of a deal with Russia for gas and lower prices and this and that. If you don't sign this, what am I going to do for you? You don't have any cards to play. I'm trying to do some deals with Russia's telling me they may work with me for a deal on Iran. I'm trying to do that. Russia's telling me they got minerals and I know they got gas. I'm trying to get inflation down. I got things I need to do. We're trying to eat here in the US. We're just trying to eat, man. So I suggest you guys sign this damn thing or we're out of here. Your choice. Of course, you know the Ukrainians ain't going to sign it and then I'm out. I mean, do you see any other options for Trump? What are
Trump said that. Trump was like, look, see, that's the wild part about Trump, right? Because he came out in that thing after he said, we're going to pass the mother of all sanctions. He then says, Russia is, they're willing to work with me. But the Ukrainians, they just are hard to work with. They don't want to deal. Like he came up, like both of those things came out within like 24 hours of each other. Like just two completely different tweets. I mean, that is funny to me, and it should be funny where it's like, it's a long list. How much you need to sign it, or else we're out. He said, or else we're out. He's already said that, right? He was like, look, I'm trying to get a deal. If they want a deal, we'll just leave. We're out. We're out. You can deal with this on your own. It's not going to be pretty. So, you need to kind of sign on the dotted line. Well, they're going, it's going to be Ukraine and the United States having some kind of negotiation, which is weird to me. Like, why would Ukraine and the U.S. need to go for negotiation on anything? Like, ostensibly, they're our allies. We've been talking to Ukraine and Zelensky for forever, like every day for the last several years. Why would you need to have a summit with an ally? That seems super weird to me. I don't quite get that one. But nevertheless, Ukraine wants to have their summit, just like the U.S. had their summit. And you are probably right. Hey, this is going to hurt. I understand that. But I need you to sign this. And by the way, I also need you to sign 50% of your wealth over to us while we're doing this. I know you're going to complain. I know you don't like it. But what else do you got? Because the truth of the matter is, if this keeps going, your forces are going to collapse on the battlefield, in which case there are no chips, in which case Russia runs the roost, meaning they get whatever they want anyway. So it is better for you. And it's not even that the list is long, right? Like Russia's complaints weren't insane. No expansion of NATO into Ukraine. Ukraine is demilitarized because we now don't trust you. And we don't want you to build up another force in the way that you did after Minsk. So demilitarize Ukraine. And by the way, we're helping you with that by killing all of your military. So there's that. And on top of that, the Russian language is preserved. You can't do this stuff about killing ethnic Russians or at the very least criminalizing being a Russian in these parts of Ukraine that are left. Like this stuff is not, shocking per se, if that makes sense. I mean, yeah, Crimea and these territories are now part of Russia, but you lost those in war. Like this was a situation where this was litigated on the battlefield in a war that Russia tried to prevent for years. And so, yeah, it hurts. I get it. It's humiliating. I also get that. But what is the alternative? It's that part. What is your other option? Right? Like, do you want your military to collapse on the battlefield? That will happen. With the US pulling out from intelligence, pulling out support, with that stuff. Okay, well, your situation has just gotten worse. If Elon Musk cuts off Starlink, I mean, hell, Elon Musk has been out there screaming we need to pull out of NATO. Like, he's been very brutal in the way that they've been thinking about this. And by the way, one last thing. Trump supporters agree with him full-throated. Hate Zelensky. Hate him. They want to stop that war. So his base backs him on this issue. So do you think he's going to walk? Do you think Trump is just going to say, all right, Zelensky's a goofball. He's not willing to negotiate. I'm calling it a day.
In a way, I could put it a different way. I could say Trump's backed himself into a corner, but that would imply that he don't want to get out of it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it a different way. He's set it up for that. It seems to me that Trump set it up to get to leave, right? He's got his back supporting him. I mean, his base supporting him. They put out all this stuff about the press gangs. They put out, the rumor I hear is that they're putting together some kind of a dossier about Zelensky, all the thievery that he's done, and they got that they got a nasty one that they're going to release and just completely degrade him and make him look bad. And who knows? It could be before, maybe tonight or tomorrow, they meet with Zelensky and say, look, you might want to take a look at this. We're going to release this to the news. We're going to release it everywhere. You're done. You're toast. And then, by the way, we're going to charge you with money laundering and theft and everything else. And we're going to lock you up. You remember a guy that used to be in charge of Panama? He was a CIA puppet too. How'd he end up? They grabbed Manuel Noriega. He was a CIA puppet. And when he didn't want to go along with the Contras in Nicaragua, they invaded Panama, bombed and killed thousands of poor people for no other reason than to show that we had a new bomber. They grabbed his ass and they put him in a jail where he died. That's his fate. That's the fate of a U.S. puppet. Yeah, you should have understood. You should have read about Noriega. You should have read about the great spirit warrior Osama bin Laden when he led the mighty Mujahideen, and we armed him and we gave him all that money. Perhaps, and he ended up getting a bullet. You should have looked at. We were giving weapons of mass destruction to Saddam Hussein, and what we did ultimately hung him. DM in Vietnam. I mean, I could go puppet after puppet. We gave him money, we lionized him, and in the end, we killed him. So they could possibly show him a documentary showing some of the former puppets, pictures of them, how they ended up, whatever. But I think a move is being made tonight or tomorrow, maybe on Zelensky, to let him know what his ultimate fate will be, that they've had enough of his bull crap. Maybe not. But I see Trump maybe by the end of the week going on TV. America, I have something to say. We're out of this war. But think about this. Last thing. Man, it really pins the Democrats for this reason. It's always popular to leave a war. So if Trump says, we're done with that war, we're out of it, we're calling it quits, we're no longer going to be involved in this war, most Americans will say, good. The Democrats will be in a position to say, no, we're going to stay in that war. We need war. Are they going to look bad if the president of the United States says, I'm pulling out of the war, and the opposition party, who just got obliterated in the presidential election, in everything, the House, the Senate, at all, and their only position is, no, we want more war. Politically, that ain't a winning strategy. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, those screeching howler monkeys are out there screaming for war purely because Donald Trump wants to end the war that they lost, by the way. Meaning their president lost the war. Another one. Because it was Afghanistan when Joe Biden first came into the administration. He got us to the brink of a third world war. Those stupid idiots in Europe who started 2 other world wars are trying to start a third. And the Biden administration was completely obliging them in doing so. And so Trump comes in as, oddly enough, the adult in the room and saying, we're going to end it. And you got those screeching howler monkeys screaming, we don't want to end the war. We don't want to end the war. We're going to keep going. And when you point out to them, but you've lost. But you've lost. Like what else are you throwing into the meat grinder? Yeah, but we need to keep going. We need for them to put in their kids into the battlefield now. We need to keep going. We just need to keep going. That's all we need to do. It's almost like a religious thing for them. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with the fact that they lost. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're low in manpower, that all of these people are deserting. It has nothing to do with any of the realities of it. It is purely a spiritual, religious endeavor in the way that they look at it, partially because they don't have to fight it. They wouldn't act that way. If they, if you feel this strongly about it, then you should go out and you should take a gun and a potato and go fight the Russians. They would never do that. Under any circumstances would they do that. But again, the loudest people in the room who's screaming that they care about Ukraine are the ones that are getting Ukraine destroyed. That's the wild part. That's the irony of all of this. It's been the irony all the way through. People like me who they're like, oh, well, he doesn't care about Ukraine. Actually, I actually do. From my point of view, they're human beings. And I don't, in the same way that I don't want human beings here getting killed and blown to hell, I don't want human beings over there being blown to hell. They don't seem to get it. You're absolutely right. They're out of touch with America. Whereas America's like, we want this to end. We're sick of this. We're sick of giving money to this. We're sick of all these people dying. If the president wants to end it, God bless him, let him end it. I think that's where most Americans are. That's not where Democrats are, which is bizarre. Like, it is the most bizarre thing in the world. Look, it is weird for me to have to argue that ending a war is good. That's weird for me, right? Because for me, that just seems like, okay, well, this is just right. If the devil himself is doing it, it's right in this case. They don't think so. And they want this war to keep going, despite the fact that they have lost. It's astonishing to me. It's super astonishing to me. It's weird.
If Trump, for some reason, if the U.S. decides to get out tomorrow, Wednesday morning, the world's a different place. The world's a different place because not only has he called the Ukrainians hand, right? Because they don't have anything. What are they going to do now? At this point, you're fighting knowing that maybe they got enough to fight a couple months. But in a couple months, you're out of everything. Everything's out. You're out of weapons. You're out of everything. What are you going to do? Let's continue to fight a couple months more. Then what happens? Well, we run out of everything and then everything collapses. Now, what about the position that he's putting Starmer, Macron, and their ilk in that have been mouthing off, running all this stuff? And now they're like at war with Trump. They're at war with the Russians. They're at war with the whole world, the Chinese, the global South. Everybody wants it to end, right? So you've got, remember this, we're going to isolate Putin. We're going to isolate Putin. But now Macron, Starmer, and all of his ilk, the entire global South says, we want this over. The Chinese, we want it over. The Russians, we'd be happy to get this thing over. The Americans, we're done. We want it over. Everybody in the world, even a lot of your own people everybody wants it over. And you got this last little holdout of leaders, if you want to call, I use that word, guardedly. Yeah. But you got this one little cabal. And the entire world is saying, number one, we want this over. Number two, wake up, dude. The Russians have won. They don't have to bargain. When you win a war, you don't have to bargain. And what are you going to do? Just keep fighting? They're going to run out of everything. It's all falling apart. What happens in Europe? They're going to get strung up before it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's wild to me, Macron has no political power at home. Like, he has lost election after election after election. You have in Germany the Alternative for Deutschland coming in second place, which again is mind blowing. That it's considered the Nazi party by many people, and yet they've come in second place in regards to the elections. Starmer is hated. Like, none of these people are all that well liked. And yet, these are the loudest voices of Europe that's screaming and screeching for more war. And you're absolutely right. The rest of the world is like, end this. Call it the day. Like, the Global South is like, for one, the Global South was never on board for this. Right?
Yep.
India, China, all these countries are not on board for it. They were never on board for it. Saudi Arabia, never on board for it. Meaning, the majority of the world was never on board for the war in the way that the US was pushing at the time for Joe Biden and for Europe. All right, the major player has pulled out. Europe is left screeching in a corner for more war that the US has no interest in. Starmer and Macron are apparently coming back to the US. They're dragging themselves back to the US to beg Donald Trump on bended knee for insurance policy on the insurance policy that they gave Ukraine. It's so pathetic that it's like, if you wrote it in a movie, nobody would believe it because it was so pathetic. And yet, here we are. They're going to come back to the US to beg Trump once again to keep the war going. Basically, they're trying to trick Trump into a tripwire. What they want is to say, hey, we'll be a backstop. And then they throw their forces in. It's like, oh, golly gee, Russia attacked our forces. Now we need the US to come in, and back us up. Trump, up to this point, has been bright enough not to do that and not to get involved in that. Yes, we will take the mineral deal. Yes, we will take everything out of the ground. No, you will not get security guarantees from us for that. This is just payback for the money that we gave you. They're not going to get what they want. Like, he's trying to end the war. Like, look, I got to be honest. I wouldn't have believed it had I not seen it at this point. The moves that Trump has made in order to try to end this conflict. Good on him for doing so. Good on him for doing so. For all of the political pressure that he had to encounter for doing this. Because he had to unravel 3 years of hysteria coming out of Europe and coming out of the language that was in the United States. And for the most part, he's been able to do it. And he's had the backing to do it by the American public that says, yes, fair enough. Call it a day. Let's end it. We'll see. I am super curious on how Democrats are regarded when they come out screeching for more war. I am super curious how the public sees them, and the warmongers in this case, which is wild, and it's a polarity flip over the course of maybe 10 years, where you had, at the very least, a coalition of the left that actually cared about this notion of anti-war. Whereas you got the George Bushes of the world that were like, we're going to go into countries, we're going to use hard military power, we're going to do all of this stuff. This stuff is radically flipped on its head at this point. And, it's weird because it flipped within my lifetime. It's very strange. And by the way, I'm not saying Trump's anti-war. He's not. It's just, he's more realistic about the realities on the ground. It's just that.
One thing I'll say this, his director of national intelligence, might I have some problems with Tulsi Gabbard about, and we're almost to the end here, but we'll just end it with Tulsi, about Israel, fair enough. But in 2020, when she ran, I went to Hawaii to be at the, let me tell you real quick, but I went there to Hawaii. I was there when she made her announcement. Let me tell you something. In 2016, I was at the infamous DNC convention in Philadelphia, where the Bernie people were outside and the whole. I was there. I would cover that for Fox News and for Pacifica Foundation, right? Yeah. And so I was doing a lot of hits for Fox. We had a big tent there, right? And I remember, I can't remember the two people I was in with. I think one of them was Cavuto and somebody else. I was on, you did a lot of segments, right? And they said, just Garland, if you had to name somebody just for crazy, this is 2016, but for 2020, who would it be? And I said, I like Tulsi Gabbard. And they said, why? I said, because at the time I said, well, of all the candidates and all the people, she's anti-war. And she's always talking about being against war. And I said, I like Tulsi Gabbard. So back in 2016, during the convention, when Obama, it was Hillary versus Trump, I liked Tulsi Gabbard because I like what she was saying about anti-war. Yeah. You can say a lot of things about her imperfections and Zionism. Fair enough. But she seems like a pretty smart person. And I listened to her in the Senate, and she said things that were true that you're not allowed to say, so much that it pissed people off that they were like, shh, we know that's true, but don't say it, right? And you have the feeling that when the curtains are closed and she is Trump's closest intelligence advisor, she's telling him the truth. Mm-hmm. She's not saying the Russians are fighting with shovels and washing machines. She's saying we got no cards to play. We're screwed. And this is what's going to happen. President Trump, I'm going to give you the information. Here's the details and the information I got. Your choice what you do with it, sir. You know, she's a military person, so she's going to salute him. She's going to give him the flat. I believe Tulsi Gabbard is telling this man the truth, and that this conversation that we're having, these types of conversations, aren't all that different from the conversations that Tulsi Gabbard are having with Trump. What do you think?
No, I think you might be right. I mean, look, when she was at her confirmation hearing and they were going after her saying, hey, you went to meet with Assad and you said all of these things about us backing terrorists and everything else. And Tulsi Gabbard was like, look, I fought for this country. I fought in Iraq, of all places. And the idea that we are now backing the same terrorists who I was fighting is outrageous. And he's like, I get that, but you weren't supposed to say that. Like, meaning it wasn't the fact that it was true. It was the fact that you uttered it aloud. You let it come out of the, it's like all of us knows that's true, Tulsi, but you weren't supposed to spill the beans on the fact that we're backing terrorists. And her mind is like, dude, I was fighting for this. Meaning I literally put my life on the line for this country, fighting the very people who you are effectively saying are now running Syria. How are you how are you coming at me, telling me that you take issue with me, pointing this out to the American public? This is outrageous. That we're backing these people in this country like this. No, Tulsi, look, she has deficits, right? Everybody has deficits on some level. But of all of the people, she had the capability of telling or saying a true thing that nobody wanted her. It's like the biggest secret in the world that nobody would say, but everybody knows. And so, I have a hard time believing that she's lying to Trump. And I go further. I get to sense that he picked her for that very specific reason. I want somebody I can trust. I don't want somebody who's going to tell me reality. And I think he chose Tulsi for that very specific point. I agree with you. The conversations that they're having, the people that they're talking to, like, for example, Alexander McCurris. It was like RFK Jr. or something like that, or RFK. Yeah, RFK Jr. listens to Alexander McCurris. RFK Jr. is in Trump's ear also. And so, there's not a massive amount of separation between the information of the people who are around Trump versus the conversations that we're having. Those things are very close to one another. Even if we come to disagreements on certain topics, Israel, we would always have a disagreement on the issue of Israel in regards to a foreign policy sense. But it's still the sense that much of what they're telling him may be very similar to what we're discussing right now. Meaning he knows what we know in this. In fact, he knows more. Obviously, he's the president. But at the very least, the information that he's getting doesn't seem to be infested with the level of propaganda that is on MSNBC or that is flowing through CNN.
I'll end by saying this. I remember when I got promoted, I was very young. I got promoted to captain in law enforcement, and I was young, and I was the superintendent, and I was like doubtful of myself, like, holy crap, I'm a captain. You know what I mean? Oh crap, what do I do now? People are going to look at me and think I'm in charge. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. The feeling that you're in over your head. It's kind of scary, right? And I remember talking to the superintendent, and he was cool and telling him, and he said, you're fine. You'll be making good decisions. He said, here's the thing you got to remember. He says, don't ever forget this word. I said, what is it? He said, candor. He says, you have to have the ability to come to me and tell me things I don't want to hear. He says, you're going to have to do it with your people. He said, but they work for you. That ain't hard. They ain't going to give you a hard time. When you say something that they don't want to hear, you're their boss. He says, you got to be able to go to your boss. He says, and you got to cultivate that amongst the people under you. Otherwise, they'll feed you a bunch of crap because that's what you want to hear, and you'll end up in a jam. You would come to me and tell me the situation's bad. Things ain't looking good for us. We got a problem. Call me in the middle of the night and say, Captain, we got a problem, a big problem. Don't wait. Oh my gosh, I'm scared to tell a captain. Tell me now. Give me a chance to do something about it, right? And I think that's where Tulsi got based on what I saw, candor. I think Tulsi, when I saw that, I said, you know what? If she's looking at something and they're like, we're screwed, we got nothing, she's going to go to Trump
and tell him,
President Trump, yeah, I need to come into your office. What is it? We're screwed, blued, and tattooed. This is it. We got nothing. When they go in tomorrow, I'm sure she's told them, look, the Russians have won the war. I don't know if you've been paying attention to current events, but Ukrainian soldiers are scurrying around like mice right now and running for their lives, and they ain't winning the race. So I'm sure she's going to tell him, she's going to brief the brief the what do you call them? The team that's going in to negotiate. What do you think, Tulsi? You know what I mean? That's all she's going to tell him. How's it looking? Yeah, that's what he's going to get. Colombian necktie. That's what you got. What are we working with? You got bupkis. You got a bagel. Here, see what you had for breakfast? A bagel? Yeah, that's what you got. And you're going to go in there, and if I suspect they're going to tell the Ukrainians, honestly, you don't have anything. So are you going to continue to play this game? Because if you're going to continue to play this game, at some point, I think too, because we got to go to a second, but at some point, I think this too. Sometimes a person can be in a relationship with somebody where they just can't take it anymore. You know what I mean? A person can be in a situation, they can be in a job, whatever, where they just say, I'm playing a game.
Yeah.
You might want to play this game. I can't play it no more.
I don't.
And you know what I mean? And I think they're going to have to go in there tomorrow, and they're going to say to the Ukrainians, and they're going to say to Starmer and Macron, guys, we're playing a game. And the game is the Russians ain't winning. I'm out of this game. The Russians are winning. If you guys want to keep playing this game, you got to play it by yourself. I think that's where they are. You get the last word, Jamarl.
Well, that's what Trump has said. But that's not even conjecture. He has already pointed out, if you keep going, we are going to leave, and you're going to have to do this on your own, and it is going to go very bad for you. It's that, right? I mean, it boils down to that. Now, the catch becomes, is Trump going to do it? Is he finally going to say, I'm done? These idiots are not going to negotiate. They want us to be completely a backstop. I'm done. And walk. And, Steve Bannon said, walk the F away hard.
He said that when Trump walked in the door. Yeah, right. When Trump came in, he said, Trump, just screw these idiots, walk away. I got my issues with Bannon, don't get me wrong, but
he's right. He's right on this. Walk the F away hard. He said, I don't even care if they investigate. I don't care. Walk the F away. And I strongly suspect that MAGA Trump supporters are there.
Or they'll rally around him. They'll circle the wagons around Trump. And to be honest with you, so will I. I'm a Trump supporter. I'm a lefty and everything else. And no, this is not my ideology. No, now screw all the Musk and stuff, Doge. I'm not down with that. But, I am when it comes to USAID and NED. But you get my point.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I'll stand up for Trump. Hey, that idiot, time out. He did the right thing here. And I will stand. If they have a rally and they want speakers at the rally saying, let's stand up, have a rally for ending the war, I would be a speaker at that rally. I'd be there holding up a hat. Now, I wouldn't wear a MAGA hat, but I'd wear like my Biden bomb Nord Stream hat or something like that. That's the best I can give them. But I'm just saying, but I'd be at the rally.
We were at the rally.
Yes,
we were at the rally.
You got to stand if you don't stand for peace.
Yeah, he's right on this issue. He's right on this issue. Anyway.
I'd be there, and I would despise any anti-war person who didn't. I'd say to the people at Veterans Intelligence for Professionals for Sanity, for VIPs, for what is the pink people?
I know you're talking about
Code Pink. All of Code Pink. I would say to all of them, you got to show up at the rally. You got to take Trump's side on this one. You got to say, we can protest against him tomorrow if he's screwing with China or whatever, but you got to be there this time. So the Democrats, I don't know. We'll see. All right. Jamarl Thomas. So here's what's important. Wow. 1,017 people.
Really?
Watching major numbers here, man. That's awesome. Hey, thanks everybody. Look, here's what you got to do. If you are a member of this, if you're a subscriber to this channel, and you can be a member, there's a little thing to click for join. If you're a subscriber to my channel, make sure that you also subscribe to Jamarl's channel. If you're a subscriber to Jamarl's channel, make sure you also subscribe to ours and check it weekly, because a lot of people get unsubscribed here and there, just saying, I don't know if it's an accident or what. Number one. Number two, certainly, we both have Patreon accounts. I got Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal. All my stuff is scrolling across the bottom, so that if you can afford to, please donate to help the channel. How can they donate to your channel, Jamarl?
Same thing. I'm on Patreon, PayPal. You can do super chat, super stickers. In fact, I want to send a shout out to a few people. Samuel,
okay, go ahead.
AA attendee, also Nicholas Walker. Thank you, all of you. Deeply appreciate it. But same, Patreon, PayPal, Super Chats, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. Jamarl Thomas Show.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll be back again soon. You know, Jamarl, we've been doing a good bit. But after this, what happens tomorrow, we might have to come on Wednesday, depending on what's going down. You know what I mean? If they walk, we got to talk. If they walk out of this,
if they walk, we got to talk.
We got to talk with the evening, man, because that'll mean we were on. That'll mean that we were there. That'll mean that we were right there with where they are. That both of us looked at and said, "What are their options?" They only got two options: stay or go. There is no
middle ground
negotiations to be made because the Russians are winning. They ain't negotiate. So they only got two options. They can stay in it and just keep playing around and doing the crap they're going. We're out. Now we're in. You got the intel. You don't have the intel. We're sending you weapons. They can keep playing footsie, or they can get out. I think they're out. All right. Jamarl Thomas, Garland Nixon. Hey, everybody. 939 people now. Look, whether or not you can contribute to either of the channels, what is important is that you share this on all your social media platforms, whether it's X, Telegram, Facebook, you name it. Share them everywhere. Thanks. We're out.